Steward Bank denied the rule violation, stating that the proof of authorization was provided in a timely manner and that they had reached out to McCarthy Bank directly to resolve the issue. That's okay. All right, great. What happened next? NACHA staff contacted Steward Bank to notify the bank that the denial of the violation was not accepted by NACHA. The name on the proof of authorization did not match that of the receiver, which deems the proof of authorization invalid.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome to Wrestling Payments. I continue with our three-part NACHA SmackDown, Rules Violations in the Ring episodes, hoping to give you some insights into what happens when folks break the rules, when participants in the ACH network break the rules and face the consequences. You like that? That was good, right? Trying something new. We're doing a little bit of a mashup between wrestling and payments, and we're talking about what I really started this podcast to talk about: the rules, issues in the rules, what happens when things go wrong. This episode is heated. So let's talk about what's going on. First note, this is the NACHA rules enforcement process. This process punishes, if you will, fines, potentially, the bad guys in the ACH network. It fines them. It doesn't get your money back. It doesn't stop them necessarily from doing it. They would be silly to do it, as you'll see from our first case. But it doesn't get the money back. So there are other things you should do outside the network to get your money back. First, in the network is arbitration. You can present cases to arbitration. The cases in this book available the book is the NACHA National System of Fines, ACH Rules Enforcement Case Studies. It's available to members via the login. We're going to make this available to everyone. You can see all the cases in here. There are arbitration cases, and the arbitration cases are decided by one, multiple, depending on the circumstances, arbitrators, and they can order a payment from one party to the other. And I say one party to the other because RDFIs are equal opportunity for being fined if they do something wrong. So don't think we're picking on ODFIs in these stories. But the first story is fantastic. I gasped as I read it. So I will try to put on my wrestling hat again and talk about this case. And I may be sure that some of you have actually had this experience. So let's see if you're in ACH operations. I'm pretty sure you've felt this pain. So let's see what happened. Okay. Steward Bank failed to provide proof of authorization. Okay, so one of the things an RDFI can do is to ask for proof of authorization as one of the steps in determining whether a receiver truly authorized or the entry is unauthorized. And part of the obligations is an ODFI must provide a copy of the authorization within 10 days of written notice. Great. So Cutler Bank was notified by one of its customers of an unauthorized teledebit transaction from Steward Bank. Okay, Cutler Bank's the RDFI, the Steward Bank's the ODFI. Cutler Bank was unable to return the transaction as R10 because it was outside the extended return time frame. If you know, a tel entry is a consumer entry. They do get 60 days to return that entry. But in this case, the customer didn't check their statement or whatever the case may be. They called them after the 60th date. So now we're looking at a breach of warranty. And in order to prove that, you have to prove the entry was, in fact, unauthorized. So first step in that is reaching out for a copy of the authorization. So Cutler Bank said, hey, can we get a copy of the authorization? Oh, here's where the match turns. several requests for proof of authorization or permission to return, both you can do one or the other, were faxed and emailed without response back from Steward Bank. Faxed and email are writing. So it was sent in writing for permission to send the entry back. After not receiving any response back from Steward Bank, Cutler Bank filed a rules violation. Good move. Good move, Cutler Bank. I like it. I encourage folks in the same situation to do the same thing. Again, it will not get your money back, but it will get their attention. When NACHA's calling you on the phone and saying, we'd like to talk about something, it gets your attention. So the process gives the party the ability to respond, and they can respond, yes, I did it, or no, I didn't. So in this case, Steward Bank denied the rule violation, stating that the institution never received the fax, and the person that received the email request had been out on vacation, had not sat out and out of office, never really saw the entry come in, the email come in, the dog ate it, all of those things, maybe most of those things, were in the response. So they denied it. They said, hey, we're done. We didn't get it. NACHA staff reached out to Steward Bank. They notified them that the denial of the violation was not accepted. So you can deny it, but NACHA determined, we're not accepting that denial. Documentation from the RD5 proved that some of the faxes had indeed been received by Steward Bank. As this was, we got getting off with a light touch, a bit of a light touch. As it was the first instance of the infraction by Steward Bank, the financial institution received a warning letter and was not subject to a fine. Alas, they were subject to fixing the problem. NACHA requires them, how are you going to fix this problem? In the next, it's 90 or 180 days. So it doesn't happen again. But there was no financial fine. And you may think that the story is over, but it's not. They kicked out at the end. And lo and behold, Steward Bank received an additional notice of possible rule violation related to proving proof of authorization upon a request. Oh, recurrence. Recurrence is not something you want to do in the rules enforcement process. So this means the same violation, NACHA received a report that they were doing the same thing to someone else or the same receiver. But in this case, McCarthy Bank was notified by one of its customers of an unauthorized web debit. McCarthy Bank faxed and emailed several requests for proof of authorization or permission to return the entry to Steward Bank. A copy of a written statement of an authorized debit was provided to Steward Bank to show that the receiver's name did not match the individual's name on the transaction. I can imagine it was in the same beyond 60 days because otherwise they could have just returned it. After Steward Bank failed to respond to the request, McCarthy Bank sent in another request stating that the rule violation would be submitted if the response was not provided. So that's nice. That's very polite. You don't want to rat them out. But there's no reason you can't do both things. The rules violation, if it's not a rules violation, they won't get fined. They did nothing wrong. If it is a rules violation, you're helping out the network by saying, stop this ODFI from doing bad things. Okay, so they sent the O letter, and the next day, Steward Bank responded providing the proof of authorization. McCarthy Bank notified Steward Bank that the name on the proof of authorization did not match that of the receiver and requested permission to return the entry. At this time, McCarthy Bank submitted the rules violation. Good for you, McCarthy Bank, for failing to provide a valid proof of authorization. Steward Bank denied the rules violation, stating that the proof of authorization was provided in a timely manner and that they had reached out to McCarthy Bank directly to resolve the issue. That's okay. All right, great. What happened next? NACHA staff contacted Steward Bank to notify the bank that the denial of the violation was not accepted by NACHA. The name on the proof of authorization did not match that of the receiver, which deems the proof of authorization invalid. As a Class 1 recurrence, right, so now we're in the recurrences of a previous infraction, the financial institution was subject to a fine between $0 and $1,000. So what happened? What happened next? The ACH Rules Enforcement Panel, again, a panel decides these things, not just staff. There's not someone in the back office saying, oh, find them, don't find them. This is a group of folks representing and constituting a panel that talk about the issues, debate them, determine what should happen next. And in this case, they issued a fine of $1,000. You want to know what happened next? The problems continued. So this is just in the notes of the case, but the problems continued. The Steward Bank and its originators did not provide RDFIs with valid proofs of authorization or proofs of authorization in a timely manner. And what did we call that? We call that a recurrence. So just as a little lesson for a Class 1 rules violation, that was the first initial one. The first recurrence is a $1,000 fine, which they received. They received a second recurrence, which was $2,500. They received a third recurrence, which was $5,000. That's all the plates in the Class 1 rules violation. The fourth recurrence is a Class 2 violation. And in this case, they have as the latest update, the most recent violation involving the infraction resulted in an ACH Rules Enforcement Panel imposing a fine of $7,500. It's pretty evident here that Steward Bank isn't taking a lot of actions to resolve this issue. I can tell you from past precedents that the fines will continue to go up. They could even continue and become recurring fines. So every month, NACHA could issue a fine that says, you are paying us $100,000 a month because you are failing to fix this problem. I can tell you if they don't fix this problem, they're probably headed that way. I look forward to the next version of the book to see if this case continues. Okay, let's go on to our second match. Just want to note the title of this episode is When Rogue Originators Enter the Ring Without Permission. So this case is an interesting one too. It's definitely a head shaker. Let's get into it. Okay. So what happened here? O'Leary Bank processed an unauthorized web transaction. So O'Leary Bank seems to be our ODFI. Nope. Hold on, let's read the case and see who becomes who. A customer of Rohan Bank. Oh yes, so O'Leary is going to be the ODFI. Customer of Rohan Bank instructed the bank to place a stop payment on a check written to Custom Bats LLC, a customer of O'Leary Bank. Okay, so we're starting off in the check world. Interesting. Okay. The contract between Rohan Bank's customers and Custom Bats LLC included notice that the check may be collected electronically via the ACH network, right? There's check conversions, normal. That could happen as long as notice was provided. Great. The amount of the check was debited from the receiver's account as a web debit, without a check number, and included a different company name, which caused the item to be paid. Okay, you can imagine that. So let's back up for a second. Stop payment. We put a stop payment on Custom Bats LLC because we wrote a check to them. It was check number XXXX, and we don't want it to be paid. We don't want it to be paid even if it's converted. The rules around check conversion are you can convert it to a ARC, a BOC, not a POP, right? Because after the fact, you can't convert a POP. Maybe even an RCK. If it traveled through the check network first. It is never, ever a web. A check cannot be converted into a web. So, and it was from a different company name. Lots of things there. It's the authorization doesn't carry over to a different company. None of this is good right now. Let's see what happens next. Okay. Upon contacting the payee of the check, the receiver was told that all checks were processed by a third party. Well, that's wonderful, but did they tell them that? I don't think they did. Customer Bank LLC indicated to the receiver that the funds would be credited back to their account. Oh, great. All right, we made a mistake. Bad on us. We're going to fix it. After not receiving the returned funds, the receiver contacted Rohan Bank to complete a written statement of an authorized debit and have the transaction returned as unauthorized. Valid. A web is a consumer SEC code. Consumer has an extended time frame to return that entry. Great. Rohan Bank returned the transaction as R10. Customer advises originator is not known to the receiver. Very valid. They don't know who that company was. It was never mentioned anywhere that a third party was going to be collecting payments, and there was no authorization in a form of a web authorization. There's so much wrong with this right now. Okay. Rohan Bank filed a rules violation, good, against O'Leary Bank related to the unauthorized transaction. I said good a second ago. I don't know if that's fair to O'Leary. Let's see what O'Leary says, because they may, sometimes originators are creative on their own, and it may be unknown to O'Leary Bank. But there is that due diligence that O'Leary Bank is supposed to know how the custom BATS is processing. So, okay, we'll go back to the good on Rohan Bank. Okay, O'Leary, here's what they got. They got the notice of possible rules violation from NACHA. O'Leary Bank denied the rules violation and provided a copy of the custom BATS LLC agreement along with a copy of the receiver's check. Well, that's wonderful. But we can tell that O'Leary Bank does not have an AAP on staff. NACHA refuted O'Leary Bank denial of the violation because the agreement contained authorization for a check conversion, not a web authorization, not a website. It's, that's basics. You cannot turn a check into a web. It did not contain authorization for a web transaction. Oh, that's what I just said. Okay, what did the panel find? Let's see. Oh, more little slaps on the wrists. Okay. As this was the first instance of its infraction by O'Leary Bank, the financial institution received a warning letter and was not subject to the fine. I would advise that, I can't advise because we don't provide legal advice, but O'Leary Bank needs an AAP on staff. They just simply responded to NACHA's case saying, oh no, here, they had authorizations to send ARCs, when the entry was actually a web, is just not knowing the rules and how they work. Interesting case. This is a critical issue in the ACH. Authorizations. There are lots of issues that involve the fact that it wasn't authorized. We get calls all the time where a CCD payment for a credit card bill comes into a consumer account, or a web debit comes into a corporate account with a person's name on it for a credit card payment. Not valid. Not the authorization for that is not valid. In these cases, the time frame went a little long. So, you can, within the first 60 days, send the entry back as R10 unauthorized, or to not know who the originator was in this case. After that, and you could send it back, and that could be the end of the story. You could also say, we just want to cross our T's, dot our I's. We want to see what the authorization looked like. And the rule says when an ODFI gets that, they either have to provide the copy of the authorization or give permission to send the entry back. It doesn't matter. The receiver, the RDFI, can still ask again for a copy of the authorization, and they have to provide the authorization. So it's a matter of due diligence, understanding your originators have to keep valid copies of authorizations available so that you can get it back to the RDFI in 10 banking days. Really important. Lots of consumer protection in the ACH. Lots of consumer protection if you use consumer SEC code. So that check conversion, which can be consumer, but when that turned into a web, that entry didn't exist. There was unauthorized just by the format of authorization. Not saying whether they owed the money, didn't owe the money. That goes on outside the network, right? If these folks didn't want to pay for a kitchen because they were unhappy with the workmanship, fine, that's fine. But that's not an ACH issue. That doesn't get resolved in the ACH, doesn't get resolved by NACHA. Following the rules gets resolved by NACHA. So that's it for this episode. Hopefully you'll tune in. Part 3 of the episode. It's a sort of a tiny episode, but these are really places to learn how the rules apply. If you're an AAP candidate, you should listen to these just because you're applying the rules. It's not just, let me read the rule. Oh, the authorization for a web is the words that appear on the screen and the way we authenticated them and how they work together to be an authorization. It's, hey, look what happened here. This went wrong and they got fined for it. It's a really good way to learn how the rules work. So please tune in for the last episode and let me know how you liked them. If you didn't like them, we'll never do them again. If you liked them, I can do these all day.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.